Okay. So, and yeah, and this book doesn't have the information like I like to use to kind of introduce the lectures when they were given and stuff like that. So, I don't know if anybody has this lecture handy to look it up. Let me see if I can find it here.
Compulsion to recreate. I think it's 76. Check it out.
Yeah, 75 or 76. And then I was trying to remember oh, that's a great, okay, it's 73. There we go.
Oh, 73. Compulsion to re. Okay. That's what it is.
Oh, shoot, I'm in the wrong thing. I hate technology.
73. Oh,
There's too many choices and options and ways to go wrong. Okay, so this is November 11th, 1960, when this was originally given. And so let me go back to the Kindle version. Ah, here comes Jacob. So yeah, and this version of it is, I think, mostly this lecture. Sometimes these lectures are edited a little bit. There's a little commentary, and I like the way they sort of break it down into subheadings and chapters. It helps us a little more. So in this lecture, whoops, somehow we lost him again. Um, hey, Jacob, welcome.
Hey there. Good to see you all.
Yeah, good to see you. So we're working out of the book, The Pathwork of Self-Transformation, and we're on chapter 3, which is this lecture on compulsion to recreate and overcome childhood hurts.
Yeah,
And
I listened to that one earlier today.
okay,
That's
good. Yeah.
that's
I
a really
mean,
good one.
yeah, it's a very, foundational lecture, and I think most path workers discover time and time and again when, there's a reaction, there's something going on, that you can look and get something very useful out of this lecture. So I'll go ahead and start reading, and feel free to chime in, for questions or discussion at any point. So the guide says, and this is a little commentary, I think probably by Donovan or maybe Peg Humphrey. The guide says that depth psychology is a spiritual discipline because only through knowing yourself can you purify your soul, that is, cleanse it of self destructive patterns and make it ready to connect with the inner God. The repetition compulsion is well known in psychology. Freud also, talked about this before, the lectures were given. But I think it's much more clear to me the way Eva presented it than what's in the standard psychological understanding. What this repetition is supposed to achieve has never been illuminated or explained as in this lecture. So, psychology has noticed this before, but they have not understood it thoroughly as this lecture. So our repeated negative experiences are bound up not only with our early childhood, but also with previous incarnations. And with the help of this lecture, we can discover why we keep running in our respective squirrel cages and how we can stop doing so. Mm-hmm. So, greetings, my dearest friends. God bless all of you. May the divine blessings extend to every one of you, help you assimilate the words I speak tonight, so that this will be a fruitful occasion for you. The lack of mature love. Because children so seldom receive sufficient mature love and warmth, they continue to hunger for it throughout their lives, unless this lack and hurt is recognized and properly dealt with. If not, as adults, they will go through life unconsciously crying out for what they missed in childhood. This will make them incapable of loving maturely. You can see how this condition continues from generation to generation. So, each generation kind of gets lost in this unconscious crying out for what they missed in childhood, preventing them from giving, a mature love to their children and to the next generation. And so it kind of keeps happening. So the remedy cannot be found by wishing that things were different and that people would learn to practice mature love. The remedy lies solely in you. True, if you had received such love from your parents, you would be without this problem of which you are not really and fully aware. But this lack of receiving mature love need trouble neither you nor your life if you become aware of it, see it, and rearrange your former unconscious wishes, regrets, thoughts, and concepts by aligning them to the reality of each situation. As a consequence, you will not only become a happier person, but you will also be able to extend mature love to others, to your children, if you have any, or to other people in your environment, so that a benign chain reaction can start. Such realistic self-correction is contrary to your present inner behavior, which we shall now consider. So all people, including even those who have started to explore their own unconscious mind and emotions, habitually overlook the strong link between the child's longing and unfulfillment and the adult's present difficulties and problems. Because only very few people experience personally and not just recognize in theory how strong this link is. Full awareness of it is essential. There may be, we can kind of oh yeah, I see, like that's the same feeling again, and so we kind of begin to recognize it a little, but he's saying that there's again, we have to really bring this into clear consciousness. And so there may be isolated exceptional cases where one parent does offer a sufficient degree of mature love. And even if one parent has it to some measure, very likely the other does not. And then since mature love on this earth is really only present to a degree, the child will suffer from the shortcomings of even a loving parent. So we're all imperfect. We all have shortcomings, right? So it's kind of like built in. I don't know whether this is like original sin or what, but we end up feeling the suffering of the shortcomings of our parents, no matter how good they were. And of course, if they were not, if they had a lot of shortcomings, like we have to remember, they brought us here, we survived this long, right? And that, probably as beings, the Pathwork talks about, we choose to come into those families for sole purpose reasons that we have of our own. And they, this wounding that they gave us is in some way a sacred wound, right? So, but it doesn't negate the fact that we still suffer from, in childhood, a lot. And then we kind of continue to sort of relive that suffering in adulthood as well. More often, both parents are emotionally immature and cannot give the love the child craves, or give it only in insufficient measure. And during childhood, this need is not conscious. It's rarely conscious. Children don't have a way of putting their needs into thoughts, and they can't compare what they have with what others have or what they think. They just know that something, they don't even know that something else might exist, right? They believe that this is the way it should be somehow. Or in extreme cases, they may feel especially isolated, believing their lot is like no one else's. Both attitudes deviate from the truth. In both cases, the real emotion is not conscious and therefore cannot be properly evaluated and come to terms with. Thus, children grow up never quite understanding why they are unhappy, nor even that they are unhappy. Many of you look back on childhood convinced that you had all the love you wanted just because you actually did have some love. So, and then of course, many of us, know different, right? And we resent or we feel kind of victimized by this lack of love. that we needed so badly. And so, there are a number of parents who can give great demonstrations of love, and they may overindulge their children. And then such spoiling and pampering may be an overcompensation, a sort of apology for a deeply suspected inability to love maturely. Children feel the truth very acutely. They may not consciously think about it, but inwardly, children keenly feel the difference between mature, genuine love and immature, over demonstrative varieties offered instead. And then, of course, they also feel, when it's withheld or when, the parent isn't, in that space of holding them, but, judging, criticizing, being harsh, that kind of thing. So,
And Darlene wanted to add a thought about that.
uh-huh.
When the guide says they can feel keenly, are we talking about their unconscious, like bodily sensations kind of beyond their awareness? Because, it kind of contradicts with what was said earlier about they don't know what's going on and they just kind of go along with this is okay, this is how it is, this is, or are we talking about something very subtle here, very specific, like when somebody's mom buys them a lot of gifts because they are distant and they don't know how to show that nurturance and warmth in another way, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he was using that one example specifically, but I think in general, it's like both are true, right? Like we can't name what's wrong, we can't understand it, and we don't have anything to compare it with. So, at one level, we accept it. Most of the time, what we do is we assume it's something wrong with us because we do keenly feel the lack of the love, right? But as a child, because we can't name it and we can't see, oh, like our parents are not capable of giving us mature, we feel like it's something, this we're aware we're not getting it, and then we must assume that it's the problem is within us. And occasionally we have maybe enough consciousness, like you said, to see, like that it's, the problem is in the parents, but and then that we become sort of isolated, and sometimes even like, we feel like we know more than our parents, when the child has contempt and rejects the, the parents because there's some kind of, awareness of the consciousness is greater in the child. But for most of us, I don't know if you remember, I mean, when you were young, did you have a sense of, something missing and at the same time not being able to put your finger on it and just kind of keep trying to figure out how to be the way your parents wanted you to be so you could get what you needed, right?
Well, yeah, that's the tricky part is that when the word love is used in this context, I don't know what is being communicated. Is it the acceptance? Is it warmth and nurturance? Is it, unconditional kind of
It's any
presence?
of those. It's any of those. And you might have gotten some of that and not something else. So I think someplace else in this lecture, the guide says, there was one kind of love that you really, really needed and wanted and you didn't get. And it could have been more than one. But, it's like it could be any of those. So which love do you feel you hunger for still in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What is this, what is the love inside that you feel that you never got sort of in a way, and that you're still trying to get from your mates, from your, other, sometimes from your children, like, so this is to try to understand and feel like that. And then this may make more sense then, because you can tell where you keenly felt that, but you really didn't understand necessarily that was what the issue was, and then, it just was somehow not available, and you kept trying, kept trying to do better or to find a way, right? To put the lack behind you, or put the, that you tried and you didn't get it, so the disappointment, and you try to keep putting that behind you and keep, going forward to get it. some other way.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that, for me, just briefly, I think it was very kind of the universal craving for uh, complete acceptance of me as is, although I think maybe even on some level, I mean, I think they kind of wanted me to be different in some ways, but on some level, they really did accept me, especially when I compare my life to other people's lives. There's a lot of support, and initially there was challenge, but then they were quite flexible. So, but I still felt like a craving for it. So, I think that maybe like a childlike thing in the part of my psyche that, maybe is impossible in some way. So I don't, it's so hard to tell,
I
what
mean,
it
in a way
was,
it
what part of
is.
it
Yeah.
was them, what part of it was me, it's so tough.
And the guide says, as children, we live in a hundred reality. And so, yeah, we want it perfect and we want all the love and we want them to love our brothers and sisters, but we want them to love us most, or we want them to love each other, but we still want to love, be loved first, So there's a lot of contradictory and conflicting feelings inside of us around all of this,
Mhm.
right? And so, it is the fact that there is no like perfect love, and in a way the child, like, if I get my way, then that's being loved, right? Which it's not the ultimate truth, right? But for many children that's how it feels, right? There's this deep process that's happening on all of these levels, and yet the guide is saying, like, if we really had experience of genuine mature love, then it would be, experienced quite differently, right? We wouldn't have this other level of it happening, because this is the beginning then of the creation of the idealized self-image and the mask and all of that, right?
Mhm.
And
Is
the
it, do you
images.
think that this, I don't know if this impacts everybody on the same level, because I can imagine some children being quite starved because some parents are quite a bit more stunted in that way. And then, you can really see this in some people's lives where they chase that in their partners, and they, chase it through, I don't know, money or something like that, right? And then in some other people, it's more subtle. And so it's so hard to tell whether it's, again, nature nurture kind of thing. But I'm wondering whether the guide is saying this is everyone's struggle, or
Absolutely. This
whether
is
this
so
is,
universal and
oh, okay,
so
interesting.
deep. And so every time you go into your triggered emotional responses, whether that's withdrawal and hunkering down, whether, whenever you're in a conflict, think of with your spouse, right? Whenever we're in conflict, you can be damn sure this is going on, and at a very deep level. And so, as we get into this lecture, the guide is going to tell us, like, how to get out of it, but if it's a very difficult process. We don't like to go there. And so we resist it for a long time. But it's eventually get to our knees with it, because it's the only way through. And so, and it's deep in everyone, even if you had more of it than others. Like the guide basically says, no, everybody has the same amount in some sense, right? We came in and we brought in a combination of things that were going to support us and things that were going to challenge us and things that were going to be triggering of our old images so that we could work on it, right? And each person is unique, and yet each person, was uniquely wounded to the depth of their core. And if it wasn't in this lifetime, maybe in another lifetime, so they had it a little softer, but it activated this deep lack that came maybe again from other lifetimes, right? So it just depends on how evolved we are and how much we take on. And so some people that have really intense childhoods, I find, I mean, some of them, are, pretty damaged, but a lot of people that we work with, right, I see a lot of very resilient, very damaged people, right? And so I assume that the damage from their childhood, was minimized to some degree, giving them a chance at survival because they had such, a higher level of consciousness in the incarnation. They were older souls. They brought in more. They challenged themselves more deeply because they had an inward resilience that younger souls wouldn't have, right? And so everybody gets the same wound all the way to the core in this, basically. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yes, and I don't know if it totally lines up with my experience as far as like shadow early childhood stuff and ego stuff. It sounds like you're saying that it's all from the same origin, from this lack of love, but I also seems like there's maybe a past life potentially distortion, or a being in an environment and being kind of self-absorbed and the psyche being a bit distorted,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then
I'm not
interpreting somebody
saying that
else's stuff.
I'm not saying that it's our parents' fault, right? I'm
No, I'm not
saying we
hearing you say
chose
that.
those parents precisely because of their incapacity to love. Like we also chose them precisely for their capacity to give us some of their gifts and a capacity to survive, or, to challenge us in a way. But it's like, so it's never about being a martyr or a victim or, like somebody did it to you. But
Sure.
it is where, like until you can actually face and feel this wound, you're in an unconscious defense around it and you don't recognize it. And so you continue to recreate it. And so it's about really waking up to the presence of this in your specific experience, and then following it all the way to the original pain, whether it was in this lifetime or another lifetime, this kind of almost archetypal pain of, something, abandonment, of not being seen, of, being controlled of your will. There's all kinds of early childhood traumas that happen, right? And lack of being met where our true needs are, and at different stages in childhood, right? So some mother may be really good at giving all the love and nurturing to the infant, but the minute that the child starts running around and having its tantrum about its way and what it wants, the parent wants to control it and wants to punish it or wants to, and so there's different stages where this love, that we needed, whether it was our autonomy or whether it was true warmth and nurturing, whether it was, like really truth and meeting the person, without manipulation, right? There's many ways that the immature love uh, impacted, and then we suffer from that, and it hurt us so badly at the time. And this is what we don't understand because we cover it up. It's like we put a Band-Aid over it and a bunch of scar tissue, and we don't remember anymore how much pain we were in that circumstance. And so, then when adult, like then when we run into that, potential pain in our present life, that's when we get triggered and we go into our emotional reactions. Instead of
Right.
being able to stay grounded and, navigate, with truth and love. So, but the reaction is like PTSD, right? And so we're uh, just, working through, and in a way, because it was so painful to feel it back then, we keep hoping that if we can just, get it right now, if we can win that love now, then we don't have to feel this hurt that we had back then. And we don't have to feel it now because now we've won. So we keep trying to win and get it right. And by that way avoid ever feeling this deep buried pain that we've hidden inside. So let me go ahead, and I think I'm ahead of myself and go ahead and read through. Is there any other comments at this point? Anybody else want to chime in? Okay, so proper guidance and security are the parents' responsibility and call for authority on their part. And there are parents who never dare to punish or exert a healthy authority. And this failing is due to guilt because real giving, warming, comforting love is absent in their own immature personalities. Other parents may be too severe, too strict. They thereby exerted domineering authority by bullying the child and not allowing his or her individuality to unfold. And then most people are a combination, right? And both types fall short as parents, and their wrong attitudes absorbed by the child will cause hurt and unfulfillment. In children of the strict parents, the resentment and rebellion will be open and therefore more easily traced, although sometimes in very strict parents, especially if there is another rebellious sibling, the child takes on the law upholder and, will become identified with the strictness and not rebel, right? And try to be a good little person the way that the parents want. So again, the guide gives these specific examples, but there's, it's like there's lots of them. So in other case, the rebellion is just as strong, but hidden. And so, we resist deep inside, but we won't show anybody, and therefore infinitely harder to trace. And if you had a parent who smothered you with affection or pseudo affection, yet lacked in genuine warmth, or if you had a parent who conscientiously did everything right, but was also lacking in real warmth, unconsciously you knew it as a child and you resented it. Consciously, you may not have been aware of it at all, because when a child you really could not put your finger on what was lacking. Maybe you were outwardly given everything you wanted and needed. How could you draw the subtle, fine borderline distinction between real affection and pseudo affection with your child's intellect? The fact that something bothered you without your being able to explain it rationally made you feel guilty and uncomfortable, and therefore you pushed it out of sight as far as possible. So, we feel like something's wrong. We don't know how to, understand it, and sometimes maybe we're mad at our parents, but then that'll make us feel guilty too, or whatever. And again, even when we have very cruel and harsh parents, we can't underestimate the level of attachment and love the child will still have for them. Right. Deep down, even when they've kind of already got a who cares exterior or, a little defiance or rebellion in it, like deep down, the emptiness and the longing and the unmet connection that they needed from these parents is very deep and very much really there. So as long as the hurt, disappointment, and unfulfilled needs of your early years remain unconscious, you cannot come to terms with them. No matter how much you may love your parents, an unconscious resentment exists in you, which prevents you from forgiving them for the hurt. And you can only forgive and let go if you recognize your deeply hidden hurt and resentment. And again, some parents may deserve, again, he talks about, sort of like, parents that are just like sort of slightly imperfect, but sometimes, it feels, especially to the child, that there was a lot of damage and injury and a lot of terrible things. And as we grow up and we begin to reflect back and we begin to kind of understand and see that, we can get kind of caught in feeling, like, well, if they had been better, we wouldn't have to, deal with all of this and have had to gone through all of this. But remembering again that the guide is saying that we chose to go through all of this and we chose our parents to help us begin that and, accomplish that journey. So you can only forgive and let go if you recognize your deeply hidden hurt and resentment. As an adult human being, you will see that your parents, too, are just human beings. They were not as faultless and perfect as the child had thought and hoped them to be, and yet they are not to be rejected now because they had their own conflicts and immaturities. The light of conscious reasoning has to be applied to these very emotions you never allowed yourself to be aware of fully. So I don't know, like, like we have lots of different feelings about this, Can you be in touch with the place, where you do have some resentment or some, feeling of, you know, anger or frustration with how your parents were and kind of feel like that's sort of the source of some of your difficulties now? Sometimes it's easier when parents are, like what you were describing, Jacob, where they tried, they were doing, like, mine were that way too, it was like, but it almost made me crazier because I could recognize that they weren't monsters, and yet I was all messed up and I couldn't understand why. And then for other people that have clearly all messed up parents, right, then maybe they can get kind of trapped on the other side, just in seeing that if they hadn't had them, somehow life could have been different or better, or you know it was all, that's the problem, right? Instead of looking at a deeper level to the soul journey to kind of understand why did we choose these parents? What was our purpose? What are we going for? What are we developing in ourselves? What are we transforming, that's off in ourselves? Where are our images that, may have come from another lifetime, but then we use these parents to kind of re-establish in consciousness for us in this lifetime, right? So he says, as long as you're unaware of the conflict between your longing for a perfect love from your parents, and then later on we substitute parents and then everybody else outside, our mates, our bosses, our friends and everything, like that we have our resentment against them, and you're bound to try to remedy the situation in your later years. This striving may manifest in various aspects of your life. You run constantly into problems and repeated patterns that have their origin in your attempt to actually reproduce the original childhood situation, because that way you can correct it, right? So if you don't actually reproduce the exact original situation, you really can't get it right. You can't fix it. You can't correct it. So this is very key in this lecture, to recognize there's this, feeling that somehow you haven't mastered it, and you have to keep trying so you can get it right this time. And this is an unconscious way, but it's partly the unconscious way that then we attract bosses and mates and people into our lives that have kind of the same incapacity to love us in this way that we deeply wanted to be loved. So, we're basically reproducing that lack of love in our current partner or our current, situation somehow. And in order, kind of like unconsciously, we need to do that because we have to reproduce it in order to improve it, to correct it. But he says this conscious compulsion is a very strong factor, and it is deeply hidden from your conscious understanding. The most frequent way of attempting to remedy the situation is in your choice of love partners. Unconsciously, you will know how to choose in the partner aspects of the parent who has particularly fallen short in affection and love. And, that is the real and genuine stuff, right? So you're going to kind of unconsciously select a partner that has the same limitation or lack of capacity to give you this love. Now, they don't really totally have a lack of it, but we will draw out that lack, I mean, as we try to get it from them, but this is the good news in some ways, is that even when we select similarly, if we can wake up to this, we can, like actually turn the relationship into a beautiful relationship. But we have to recognize where this is happening And if we can't, if we recognize it and do their inner transformation, if the relationship doesn't change, then we know, yeah, okay, this person is stuck there. I need to go on and find somebody who is capable of loving in this way. But as long as we're in a dynamic from this childhood and we're recreating the provocation and the feeling of grievance and suffering in the relationship, and we haven't understood this level of it, then we really can't resolve it at the interpersonal level. So again, he says, go ahead.
Yeah, well, okay, so it's wonderful when you're a path worker and you actually wake up to this consciousness after trying to recreate and heal your wounds several times before you ever got to path work, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And still,
And
even
you
while you're
just,
in Pathwork, you're still doing this
well,
unconsciously.
yeah, well, to a degree, but at least at that point you can see that you're doing it again.
Right. Right.
Okay. And then you would just have to sit and wonder, and like, the rest of the planet is totally unconscious to this.
Exactly.
People are just going around choosing the wrong mates because they think that if they get it right with this one, it'll fix the hurt that they feel from their childhood.
Yeah.
They've been carrying around in their subconscious emotional part of their
Right.
personality or psyche for
And
decades.
right. And it goes back to the same, the issue that he mentioned earlier, right? When we're unconsciously hungering to be loved in a certain way, we're not giving love, right? So now you've got this thing going on. So the other partner is equally involved in this recreation.
And equally deprived of what they
Right.
need from you.
Exactly. and so there's this huge tug of war going on, right? And neither partner can give to the other partner because they're still feeling like they have to get it first, that they can't, they can't be okay unless they have this first. And
and even if you understand this whole thing on a conscious level, you can still be in a relationship and you can say to yourself, finally, this time I chose someone who's not like the parent who wounded me the most, and I don't think I'm actually requiring what my wounded child actually needs from this person. But for some reason, this isn't working either. I mean, it cannot be fulfilling. You can be in that relationship, and even though you love the person and you're being a consciously aware human being, that also cannot be a completely fulfilling relationship environment either.
and the thing is that, like what happens is that when we really can, receive this love from ourselves, right? So we're not in this tug of war when we know and we give it to ourselves, right? That makes a difference. And then we're giving to others. And then as we give to others, or, as we just become our natural self, right? And we're not in this demand and in this struggle, they naturally then come to us with, it's easier for them to love us.
Yes.
Right. And so then the benign circle begins to happen. Right.
And it's easier for them to love us, and it's also easier for us to receive
Exactly
their love.
Exactly. Because we feel like we're not demanding it and they're giving it, kind of gratis. They're giving it, like when we demand love, even when we get it, we don't really, well, you're just giving it to me because I'm demanding it. It's like it doesn't feel very
You're just
fulfilling.
giving me what you think I need, You're just giving me what you think I need. And
or what I insist. Yeah.
Feel that,
It's not coming from your
that.
heart. It's not coming spontaneously.
Yeah.
It's coming because I insist that you be this way, and that we don't feel, we can't really receive that kind of love either.
It's complicated, and really, I mean, you could say that until you really know how to love yourself, you're going to be lost in this messy soup of love from everybody else. But that whole part about loving yourself is even more complicated.
It is. It's tricky, and yet it is the foundation, right? And it is kind of the original psychic split and wound. So it feels like, while it is complex, that's going down to the next level, and again, part of it is in this lecture, where the guide says we just have to feel the original hurt. And actually, when we actually drop into and go back into that, we start loving ourselves, right? Because we can see what we went through with compassion, and we hold and understand ourselves. And then we can also reparent the child and say, like, that was, that's not right. Like, the truth is you're fine, or you did your best, or, so we began reparenting, and that's what the child needs, right? Is to be, brought into a kind of emotional maturity, by being helped to be held in the stress and then told the truth, right? Which is what healthy parents would have done for us, but we didn't have them. And so now we have to do it for ourselves.
Yeah, well, in terms of the original hurt, before we even get to the hurt of that the parents have inflicted, let's say this original hurt is like, part of the biggest part of your soul bent. Okay. Brian Stokes seems to believe or say over and over again that it's just a general feeling of unworthiness that's in the human psyche. That, there's this, I'm unworthy of whatever I think I'm unworthy of. And that is the biggest wound, the biggest hurt.
Right. And then somehow we feel frustrated and, hopeless because, somehow we're unworthy. We can't, and so then we turn against ourselves. And that to me is then the bigger wound, because it's like, now we're hating ourselves, or we're frustrated with ourselves, or we're trying to control ourselves, which is also part of this, like trying to, get it right this time. Right. And judging again, and so it kind of just, it continues to spin what we have, like the idealized self-image, everything it notices, it can judge. And so we have to just kind of keep stepping back behind that judgment. And the judgment is the separation, right? And the whole process is reunification, is integration, is, so where we judge ourselves, we really do have to, look at that unworthiness and, find out, is that the truth? Right. And this is where, like, looking through God's eyes and invoking, the wisdom of the higher self is important as well, because there is an emotional truth inside of us that says, yeah, somehow it's something must be wrong with us, or we're, not worthy enough or something. But if we really examine that consciously, we can begin to crack that cosmic egg. And then we can, like, recognize, why we wanted to believe that, or we feel like, we're unworthy, and dispel it, right? Because there is no such thing. It's not even possible. And yet we carry this original sin, this, sense of inadequacy, deep within us. And then we're always trying to do the self-improvement thing, right? And that's not, there's a part of that, but most of it is through grace, and most of it is through accepting and loving ourselves as we are now. And so whenever we're in this, struggle, or trying to, improve or get it right, again, we have to, examine, like, well, what's really going on here? And is this working, right? There are things
like, why do I think I have it wrong in the first place?
Right, exactly.
Why do I think I'm not worthy of God's love? Why won't he let me back into the kingdom, so to speak? Why do I have to keep reincarnating? Why am I not pure enough yet?
Right.
And
one of the things that Yeah. And I mean we can answer that with lots of, reasons, but usually one of the things that helps us, see that we're in distortion is, well, you have children, you have friends that that are equally as inadequate or imperfect or whatever, you forgive them, you are much less harsh with them, you treat them in a very different way than you treat yourself. You're a big hard ass with yourself
Yeah.
at some level, right? And you think that that's important, that you need to be that way, and somehow you realize, no, that's not right to be that way towards other people. So if it's not right to be that way towards other people that you care about, like, does it really make sense to be that way with yourself? It's just another defense, right? It's another false, what the guy calls a pseudo solution to life's
Sure,
problem.
there's a lecture about it somewhere too.
Yep. Yeah. So let's see, yeah, where we're going here, because I think he, like I like this lecture, and it goes deeper and deeper with this stuff. So let's see where we end up now. So, like we said, like a lot of times we unconsciously in our choice of love partners choose, aspects of the parent, that, and even if that person doesn't really have a strong quality that way, it will be in them to some degree, and then we will provoke it out of them in the way that we kind of respond to that, right? That we sense it's there and we want to. So it'll activate in our everyday here and now relationships, and it's always very useful to try to apply this lecture where you're having some disharmony within a relationship. So he says, you also seek in your parents aspects of the other parent who has come closer to meeting your demands. So, it's a kind of a blend and combination. Important as it is to find both parents present in your partners, it is even more important and more difficult to find those aspects that represent the parent who has particularly disappointed and hurt you. The one more resented or despised, or for whom you had little or no love. So I don't know, see if you want to do that inside, like in your example, see, your relationships, and see if you can find in that partner any aspects that seem to represent, that parent that just, you had resented and hurt you. So in a subtle way, not always easy to detect in your marital partners, in your friendships, or in other human relationships, in your subconscious, the following reactions take place. Since the child in you cannot let go of the past and cannot come to terms with it. So this is the integration, right? Cannot forgive, cannot understand and accept. This very child in you always creates similar conditions, trying to win out in the end in order to finally master the situation instead of succumbing to it. Losing out means being crushed. This must be avoided at all costs. The costs are high indeed, for the entire strategy is unfeasible. What the child in you sets out to accomplish cannot ever come to realization. So if we can really find this in us and see this, and help the child recognize, what it's doing and how it's never, ever, ever going to work. It's a part of this, kind of, confrontation that the child needs to, have and sort of be up against this wall that says, like, no matter what you do, you're never, ever going to get it. You can't master this situation. You have to just die and feel the hurt of it instead of trying to avoid integrating this by succeeding in the future. We have to accept it. It was part of our history. It was where it is. And now somehow we're still unconsciously trying to set that right. And the guide says, we didn't do anything wrong in the first place. There's nothing we need to do to get it right, right? So he says this entire procedure is
Darlene, can I,
yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Joaquin.
can I interject? Um, there was a part that I've reread that one part that you just read, probably at this point, probably like 200 times. And there's this one part that I'm trying to make sense of. Let me see. The entire procedure is utterly destructive in the first place. It is an illusion. Um, is there a part missing?
If you read directly from the lecture, it could have been some editing. I don't know, but it's also kind of like there's things scattered through this, so we may not be there quite yet.
No, it was right in that passage that you read.
I think, yeah, and I think
Can you
I
go
was
back
on the other
one
page.
page,
So
maybe?
it's since the child in you cannot let go of the past, cannot come to terms with it, cannot forgive, cannot understand and accept, this very child in you always creates similar conditions, trying to win out in the end in order to finally master the situation instead of succumbing to it. Losing out means being crushed, and this must be avoided at all costs.
There, that's it. That sentence right there. Losing out means being crushed. Can you point your arrow at it just so I can have it? I can see it. Right there. Yeah, perfect. So is that what the guide is saying the child thinks? That the child thinks losing out means being crushed
Doesn't
and
even
that the
think it,
child must
it's,
avoid it?
yeah. Exactly. That's the experience, right? Like because that was the original experience. It was totally crushed by this lack of love, that it was so painful and it's such a deep wound inside that we can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. We have to avoid it at all costs. It was a death because we were little and we were very, open and we, nothing. And so there was a real trauma here that did crush us, right? And we couldn't manage to feel it. We had to stuff it. We had to hide it inside of us and just keep going, right? But it still lives in us unresolved and unintegrated because we could never face that being crushed. So that's what we have to do now. And now we can feel this crushedness that we didn't feel back then because it was too big for our little self to feel. Now we're big enough
So it's
to feel.
saying losing out means being crushed, as in right now, there's a child in me that's saying, if I lose out again, I'm going to be crushed. Basically,
Yeah,
is it
you
kind
don't
of
want
like,
to feel so like think of some arguments that you've had with your partner, right? And you have not actually gone underneath to really see what that crushing thing is, but as long as you're still defending and battling and arguing, you're refusing to go to the death. So what death would you die if you stopped fighting and just felt whatever is there? And if you can go into that, you will find that's kind of like at one level it may be okay, but if you keep going, you'll see where that was the original, crushedness of the child.
no, I get that surrounding it, but just that specifically that sentence, what it's saying is that the child in me is saying losing out means being crushed, and so therefore I must avoid that at all costs. That's basically like the thoughts, the feelings of the child, and the
That
fear
yeah,
of
there's
recreating
resistance.
the old pain, right?
Right. Like there was too much trauma to feel this
Got
pain.
it.
It would have destroyed the developing ego of the child. It would have been crushed had it, so it ran and defended and kept trying to keep from being crushed. So now we have to feel, the truth that we've tried all this time, we've never gotten it. And there's a certain pain that we just have to face and feel. And then we can go forward and then maybe resolve, in a different way. But we really have to go into this this place where the child could not originally.
So the way you understand it is that second part, this must be avoided at all costs, is the guide telling us not to do that.
No,
The
that's
guide
the
saying,
child. That's the
Yeah.
child's feeling that the child has to, because it would
okay, yeah,
destroy.
that's the way that I was saying it. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'm
guess
sorry.
I
I
understood it
couldn't
correctly. When you said it
understand the
something
question.
different, I thought you meant it a little
No,
differently. Okay, I
no. The
got you.
guide is
I
saying
got
the
you.
child, right? And how it tries to avoid it is by keeping going, trying again, getting it right this time, and so we
Right.
recreate, and then we recreate, and we keep running headlong into the hell of being crushed, and so we
Yeah.
try to stuff it behind us and keep going and try it again, and so now we've had a lifetime of kind of avoiding this feeling to try to get it right, and here we are, like how many times we come back and into those places of God, I've been here before, like in my life, here I am again, and it comes back to this very lecture, and
Gotcha.
where the goal, what we have to do is we have to hold the child. The trauma has to be faced and felt, and part of it is that the child didn't have anyone to hold it and integrate with it in that situation, so that's what we can do now for it.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you can even taste it, because like a lot of times it's so buried, because it doesn't even seem like, when you're in those arguments, you may not feel like, well, if I lose, I'm going to be crushed. But notice that you fight to the death as if you would,
Yes.
right? So if you can't stop fighting for it, it means that you're unconscious of a deeper layer of the terror of being crushed by it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. The wound itself is not something that's so, what's the word? Like post-traumatically present. It's really a buried kind of slow wounding that has happened in your psyche.
Right.
It's not like
Over time,
and
complex.
each avoidance of not being crushed is also equally subtle. It's like, okay, well, I can see where this is going. I'm going to divert. That right there, that just a little deflection, a diverting, is me avoiding being crushed.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's on a subtle level.
Yeah, and we don't even recognize that how much intensity and depth there is there, because it's kind of superficial,
Yeah.
and more subtle. So good. So the fallacy of this strategy. So this entire procedure is utterly destructive. In the first place, it's an illusion that you were defeated. Therefore, it is an illusion that you can now be victorious. Moreover, it is an illusion that the lack of love, sad as that may have been when you were a child, is indeed the tragedy that your subconscious still feels it to be. The only tragedy lies in the fact that you obstruct your future happiness by continuing to reproduce the situation and then attempting to master it, right? And I think also, we end up sort of recreating our own self, like we feel like, okay, so this is sad and I didn't get what I needed, and then we have this sort of heaviness that makes us, it makes us hard to be in life in a certain way, right? And then there's a tragedy. Life has lots of pain and lots of tragedy, and to the child in the 100, right? These wounds are like really intense, but the maturation into 50-50 and the living through the wounds and the realizing that, we come out the other side and that it wasn't kind of what we had imagined or whatever, helps us begin to, have faith and have more resilience in these things. So, and then what happens, I like when he's saying that the tragedy lies in the fact that I think someplace he's talking about really like what we do is we internalize the parent that doesn't love us in the way that we want to be loved. And so now we become that negative inner parent judging or, kind of controlling and criticizing. And so we internalize the, inner parent as well that we're trying to please, that we can never succeed in pleasing, right? And then we continue to, judge ourselves because we're not doing it right? So this whole thing, which was outside of us, now comes inside. And now we are constantly creating our own unhappiness, in this, way of having this internalized voice that judges us, that doesn't think we're okay, that, is the idealized self-image. And so then that continues to wound the inner child. So the idealized self-image now takes the place of the negative parent in some way, of the limited parent, the parent that doesn't love. And then we continue to treat ourselves without any love. And that feels familiar to some extent, right? But that's part of why we still are empty and looking for it outside of ourselves, because we're not giving it to ourselves. So he says, my friends, this process is a deeply unconscious one. Of course, nothing is further from your mind as you focus on your conscious aims and wishes. It will take a great deal of digging to uncover the emotions that lead you again and again into situations where your secret aim is to remedy childhood woes. In trying to reproduce the childhood situation, you unconsciously choose a partner with aspects similar to those of the parent. Yet it is these very aspects that will make it impossible to receive the mature love you rightly long for now, as it was then. Blindly, you believe that by willing it more strongly and more forcefully, the parent partner will now yield, whereas in reality, love cannot come that way. So we can't demand that our parent partner finally love us the way we want to be loved. It only makes them fight back and demand the same thing. So now we're back in that tug of war, right? And yet that's kind of like sort of, we blindly go to this place where we're, still fighting, still, in this tug of war dynamic, insisting on getting what we need from our partner, even while they are insisting on us giving them what they need from us. I won't give it to you until you give it to me. Only when we are free of this ever-continuing repetition will you no longer cry to be loved by the parent. Instead, you will look for a partner or for another human relationship, or even the one that you have may turn into this, with the aim of finding the maturity you really need and want. In not demanding to be loved as a child, you will be equally willing to love. However, the child in you finds this impossible, no matter how much you may otherwise be capable of it through development and progress. This hidden conflict eclipses your otherwise growing soul. If you already have a partner, the uncovering of this conflict may show you how he or she is similar to your parents in certain immature aspects. But since you now know that there is hardly a real mature person, these immaturities in your partner will no longer be the tragedy that they were while you constantly sought to find your parent or parents again, which of course could never come to pass. So when you let go, when you allow your partner to be a human being and be imperfect and not give you everything that you think you need and want, then it lightens up, and you can reduce the conflict and you discover that it's not really the tragedy that you imagine. So with your existing immaturity and incapacity, you may nevertheless build a more mature relationship, free of the childish compulsion to recreate and correct the past. You have no idea how preoccupied your subconscious is with the process of reenacting the play, so to speak, only hoping that this time it will be different. And it never is. As time goes on, each disappointment weighs heavier and your soul becomes more and more discouraged. For those of my friends who have not yet reached certain depths of their unexplored subconscious, this may sound quite preposterous and contrived. However, those of you who have come to see the power of your hidden trends, compulsions, and images will not only readily believe it, but will soon experience the truth of these words in their own personal lives. You already know from other findings how potent are the workings of your subconscious mind, how shrewdly it goes about its destructive and illogical ways. So the way out is re-experiencing the childhood hurt. If you learn to look at your problems and unfulfillment from this point of view and follow the usual process of allowing your emotions to come to the fore, you will gain much further insight. But it will be necessary, my friends, to re-experience the longing and the hurt of the crying child you were once, even though you were also a happy one. And somehow you may have become a tough one, right? To survive, the hurt. So we've got to go beyond and go underneath the compensated child, right, from the trauma. So your happiness may have been valid and without self-deception at all, for it is possible to be both happy and unhappy. You may now be perfectly aware of the happy aspects of your childhood, but that which hurt you deeply and that certain something you greatly longed for, you did not quite know what, you were not aware of. You took the situation for granted. You did not know what was missing or even that there was anything missing. This basic unhappiness has to come to awareness now. If you really want to proceed in inner growth, you have to re-experience the acute pain you once suffered. So this is where it's buried in our body, it's energetic. And so this is where we usually can't get to this with the memory or with, I find the best way to go to it is through our bodies and through the present pain of a circumstance and follow it down in, and then that, as we learn to hold and be with the child, we can, the child will reveal more and more and let us connect more deeply to that deeper acute pain. But it requires us to be an ally to that child. So as long as we're still in our ISI and there's this outer, judgment against the child and against ourselves and lack of love and compassion for ourselves, then we can't really even do that part of it. So there's a series of stages and steps to this work. And so now, we have to look at the pain, at this pain, conscious of the understandings that we've gained with it. And only by doing this can we grasp the reality value of our current problems and see them in their true light. So it's kind of like we see the present issue and the past, and they kind of come together in a way. So it says, now, how can you manage to experience the hurts of so long ago? There is only one way, my friends. Take the current problem, strip it of all the superimposed layers of your reactions. The first and most handy layer is that of the rationalization, that of proving that others or the situation are at fault and not your inner conflicts that make you adopt the wrong attitude to the problem that confronts you. And then the next layer might be anger, resentment, anxiety, frustration. But behind all these reactions, and this is where even now you might be able to drop, it's really not as hard to get to in some ways as we think it is. We're looking for the simple hurt of not being loved. So see if you can, in this moment, even right now, drop down into that part of your being that holds that simple hurt of not being loved. I mean, we have such a desire and a longing to love and be loved, and so, and we arrive here as children, like full of wanting to love and be loved. And then, there's the shock of it kind of not being there. And then in our daily reactions, the same kind of shock, like we reach out to our partner and they don't react in the way that we're hoping or whatever, right? And so if you can, in that moment, drop below all of those layers right there and simply connect in that moment with your own, place of the hurt of not being loved. And just breathe, hold that, be with yourself in that, compassionately hold and recognize, yeah, ooh, ow, that hurt, and yet not, like breathe it, hold it, feel it, allow it to move through your system. Cry if you need to cry, right? Wail even, but mostly this is the soft pain, right? This is not the pain of all of the story. It's not the pain of who did what to who. It's just the simple hurt of not being loved. Every human has felt this, and we long so much to be loved and to love. So when you experience the hurt of not being loved in your current dilemma, it will serve to reawaken the original childhood hurt. And while you face the present hurt, think back and try to reconsider the situation with your parents. So if you're, in a present hurt, and you can just feel the hurt of not being loved there, roll it back and see, how is this similar? In what way was this a similar hurt in your original family situation? What they gave you, how you really felt about them. You'll become aware that in many ways you lacked a certain something you never clearly saw before. You did not want to see it. You will find that this must have hurt you when you were a child, but you may have forgotten this hurt on a conscious level. Yet it is not forgotten at all. The hurt of your current problem is the very same hurt. Now, reevaluate your present hurt, comparing it with the childhood hurt. At last, you will clearly see how it is one and the same. No matter how true and understandable your present pain is, it is nevertheless the same childhood pain. A little later, you will come to see how you contributed to bringing about the present pain through your desire and efforts to correct the childhood hurt. So this is how we do the recreation, right? And so this is part of our self-responsibility and understanding how we do that. But the very first step, you really only have to feel the similarity of the pain and allow the truth of the feeling, the hurt, to be there, nurture it, comfort it. However, this requires some effort to get to it, for there are many overlaying emotions that cover the present pain as well as the past one. And so before you have succeeded in crystallizing the pain you are experiencing, you can't understand anything further in this respect. Once you can synchronize these two pains and realize that they are one and the same, the next step is much easier. Then, by perceiving the repetitious pattern in your various difficulties, you will learn to recognize the similarities between your parents and the people who have caused you hurt or are causing you pain now. Experiencing these similarities emotionally will carry you further on the particular road toward dissolving this basic conflict. So again, we hire, we ask our partners, the rest of the world, to provoke these pains out of us so that we can feel them to dissolve them. And so the mere intellectual evaluation will not yield any benefit. To be fruitful and bring real results, the process of giving up the recreation must go beyond mere intellectual knowledge. You have to allow yourself to feel the pain of certain unfulfillments now, and also the pain of the unfulfillment of your childhood. Compare the two until, like two separate picture slides, they gradually move into focus and become one. Experiencing the pain of now and the pain of then, you will slowly come to understand how you thought you had to choose the current situation because deep inside, you could not possibly admit defeat. Once this happens, the insight you gain, the experience you feel exactly as I say here, will enable you to take the next step. So, partly what he's saying here is that, we can't do this intellectually, because the whole point is that this is a defense against a feeling. We are defending against the feeling by trying to get it right in the future so we don't have to feel the hurt of it in the past or the hurt of it in this moment, right? And so if we keep trying to manage it in just a conceptual manner, we can never get past it, because the healing is that we simply have to just be with the pain and to recognize that the pain will not kill us, and that the pain actually is a kind of healing pain. It's a kind of, freeing pain. And so we're avoiding a pain that would have demolished us, that would have devastated us, that would have made it impossible for us as children to somehow continue. But now when we feel it now and we realize it, then we begin, oh, this is what it is. And it's something that I can feel. And it's something that actually, as I feel it, makes me stronger and does not devastate me, and makes me understand myself and hold myself more dear to my own heart in so many ways. So it goes without saying that many people are, not even aware of the pain, past or present, because we busily push it out of sight. And then we keep trying to, avoid it. And then the problems don't appear as pain. For them, it's like it's another kind of issue. So the very first step is to really become aware that underneath this whole thing is this simple pain, this simple hurt, and that it is that we have to dive down towards, in the present or in the past, either way. And so the first step is to become aware that this pain is present and that it hurts infinitely more, as long as you do not become aware of it. Like, as long as we keep trying to avoid it, it kind of keeps hanging out, and we're kind of like half feeling it and not feeling it, and we can't resolve it, and it just it's like it creates a lot of suffering, not just simple pain. And so we carry the suffering. Go ahead, somebody saying something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about terminology. I've heard the term hard pain and soft pain.
Mm-hmm.
So is the hard pain the subconscious pain that we're carrying, and we're subconsciously keep it buried? And is the soft pain when we bring it out of the subconscious and make it conscious and experience?
I mean, we can bring hard pain into consciousness and make it conscious. So I don't think it's just the difference between conscious and unconscious. But
what are these terms, hard pain and soft pain?
So I think, the hard pain is the pain with the story of judgment. It's the pain with the story of failure, where we're trying to get it right. It's the pain that says I'm bad, I screwed up, or they fucked me up, or somebody's, God's at fault, I'm at fault, they're at fault, somebody's at fault. And so it becomes this kind of pain that, is wrong and it shouldn't be, right? And by that, then we can't simply feel the truth of, well, life has pain, and here it is. It's pain. And so when we can surrender instead of resist, so hard pain is the resistance to the soft pain. And it's the pain that is created by the resistance to the soft pain. And so if we stop resisting our pain and just, again, maybe get out of the story, because the story oftentimes, has this element, and just hold, the hurt. Like if you, that guidance that the guide gave, just see if you can simply feel the simple pain of the situation. right now, without judgment or story of who's to blame or what's the reason or how it is. It doesn't matter. It just is, and it hurts. Period. It just is, and it hurts. And when we can fall into that, trusting that that movement of feeling through the pain will actually carry us to the other side and free us and clear us, and then something, new life can come in. The, that learning, that is what we get by learning to surrender and fall into the pain without the story, and just allow the movement of the energy to clear and integrate inside of us, and for us to see and understand ourselves. All of this then is comes from just being with this soft pain. So, a lot of times, like he says, we're not even aware that the pain is even there. So it's just like if we feel anger, if we feel resentment, if we feel guilt, if we feel judgment against all of those things, like whatever you're feeling, just kind of ask this question: is there some simple pain underneath this that I can drop into? So many people are afraid of this pain and like to believe that by ignoring it, they can make it disappear. They choose such a means of relief only because their conflicts have become too great for them. How much more wonderful it is for a person to choose this path with the wisdom and conviction that a hidden conflict in the long run does as much damage as a manifest one. They will not fear to uncover the real emotion, and will feel, even in the temporary experience of acute pain, that in that moment it turns into a healthy, growing pain, free of bitterness, tension, anxiety, and frustration. So that's what we're looking for. There are also those who tolerate the pain, but maybe in a negative way, always expecting it to be remedied from the outside. Such people are in a way nearer to the solution, because for them it will be quite easy to see how the childish process still operates. The outside is the offending parent or both parents projected onto other human beings, and they have only to redirect the approach to their pains. They do not have to find it. So you're already in touch with the pain, but you instead of being a victim, instead of feeling like the sort of the hard pain of the story that judges the other people for causing you pain, like again, just drop into acceptance of this pain and the simple reality that it hurts, and feel it, breathe it. Sometimes when I find when I go into my body and I can locate the kind of source of the pain as a sensation energetically, maybe it's a pinpoint, maybe it's a global overall atmosphere or mood, but it feels disharmonious, or it feels painful in some way, feels stuck, feels tight, feels it's like, that's where, if I can just kind of keep going towards that, letting go and sort of relaxing any holding, any tension, just accepting, being with, breathing through, each of those layers of feeling, until I can finally release the holding pattern around it that's trying to block us from feeling it. We hold up, we hold out, we hold in, we hold back, we hold together, we hold in all of these ways, just so we don't have to feel our feelings. What we need to do is hold ourselves in compassion, loving embrace, and help us drop into those feelings. And if we hear the child, and the child is feeling judged, or feeling like she's judging, it's okay, but then help her find the truth. Help her understand her feelings more, help her go deeper into the simple place of accepting the pain of the current situation. Once we can accept it and allow it to be, that space that we hold for that circumstance then allows inspiration or something else maybe that even we don't bring in to happen. As long as we're struggling with it, in a sense, the more we're resisting it, the more we're holding it in place. So as we can, let go and accept the struggle of the sadness, the pain as it is, without awfulizing it, without making it a forever thing, or without meaning, this means, this is what the guide calls awfulizing. But it's just the pain. Just be with the simple pain of it. And so that's what will move it through. And that is what will allow us to, come to surrender within ourselves. And that very surrender will then bring everything that we've longed for back into our experience. So you will further see the folly of the unconscious desire to recreate the childhood hurt, the frustrating uselessness of it, and you will survey all your actions and reactions with this new understanding and insight, whereupon you will release your parents. You will leave your childhood truly behind, although not your child. In a sense that I think, at least my experiences, I don't know, maybe there's more to learn, but, that we continue to work with the child, in varying ways, but that child does get more and more resilient and more integrated, right? And then brings forth more of our capacities and our talents and our, good light. So, it's really the benign circle that starts everything moving forward. And so the inner behavior pattern will be infinitely more constructive and rewarding for you and for others. And you will no longer seek to master the situation you could not master as a child. You will go on from where you are, forgetting and forgiving truly inside of you without even thinking that you have done so. You will no longer need to be loved as you needed to be loved when you were a child. First, you will become aware that this is what you still wish, and then you will no longer seek this kind of love. Since you are no longer a child, you will seek love in a different way, by giving it instead of expecting it. It must always be emphasized, however, that many people are not aware that they do expect it. Since the childish unconscious expectation was so often disappointed, they made themselves give up all expectation and all desire for love. Needless to say, this is neither genuine nor healthy, for it is a wrong extreme. To work on this inner conflict is of great importance for all of you, so that you gain a new outlook and further clarification in your self-search. At first, these words may give you perhaps only an occasional glimpse, a temporary flickering emotion in you, but they should be of help and open a door toward knowing yourself better, toward evaluating your life with a more realistic and more mature outlook. Now, are there any questions in connection with this lecture? Question. It is very difficult for me to understand that one continually chooses a love object who has exactly the same negative trends that one or the other parent had. Is it reality that this particular person has these trends, or is it projection and response? It can be both, and it can be either. In fact, most of the time, it is a combination. Certain aspects are unconsciously looked for and found, and they are actually similar. But the existing similarities are enhanced by the person who is doing the recreation. They are not only projected qualities that are not really there, but are latent in some degree without being manifested. These are encouraged and strongly brought to the fore by the attitude of the person with the unrecognized inner problem. So again, we literally bring out of the partner or of the other person, this dynamic when we're in the recreation process, whether, they have it to some degree, but it's probably not nearly as bad or intractable as our parents. And then as we project it onto them and try to, defend against it and change the outcome, we actually provoke them into being exactly the resistance that we're trying to avoid. So he or she fosters something in the other person by provoking the reaction that's similar to the parent. The provocation, which is, of course, entirely unconscious, is a very strong factor here. The sum total of a human personality consists of many aspects. Out of these, a few may be actually similar to some traits in the recreator's parent. The most outstanding would be a similar kind of immaturity and incapacity to love. That alone is sufficient and potent enough. I think sometimes too, we also, we interject some of the things that we think we should be, and then we try to apply it to our partner, right? And so we should be and so, and we want, we have sort of our demands of, like living together, how we work that out, and I think whenever we go into an inner parent state, right, with the partner, you should be, right, you're going to create a child reaction from them because, transactional analysis taught us this, if you come from the parent state of consciousness, you're going to provoke the child state from the other person. And if you come, from the child state, you're going to provoke the parent state. So again, what we're trying to do is get to the core of this and hold ourselves and then speak truth with love, speak from the adult state of consciousness, right? But we have to be able to hold ourselves to do that in a different way. And we have to recognize when we're in our parent state and when we're in our child state of consciousness. The parent state is often sort of the idealized self-image state that we apply to ourselves as well as to other people, how they should be. So the same person would not react to others as he or she reacts to you because it is you who constantly do the provoking, thereby reproducing conditions similar to your childhood for you to correct. Your fear, your self-punishment, your frustration, your anger, your hostility, your withdrawal from giving out love and affection, all these trends of the child in you constantly provoke the other person and enhance a response coming from that part of them which is weak and immature. However, a more mature person will affect others differently and will bring out that in them which is mature and whole, for there is no person who does not have some mature aspects. So again, if we come from our adult, we are inviting their adult to meet us, right? When we come from our parent or our child, then we're creating this recreation scenario. Question: how can I make the distinction as to whether the other person provoked me or I the other person? Answer: it is not necessary to find out who started it, for this is a chain reaction, a vicious circle. It is useful to start by finding your own provocation, perhaps in response to an open or hidden provocation of the other person. So again, you can see what triggered you, right? But you don't want to make them then responsible for it. You want to recognize, oh, I'm being triggered by this, and be responsible for your own trigger. Thus, you will realize that because you were provoked, you provoke the other person. And because you do so, the other again responds in kind. But as you examine your real reason, not the superficial one, the reason why you were hurt in the first place, and therefore provoked. So again, instead of going to the provocation, drop down into the hurt. According to tonight's lecture, you will no longer regard this hurt as disastrous, which is kind of like the child, so big and so intense, throw it in the closet, put skull and crossbones across the door, never, ever, ever go close to that, right? So we get close and we go into big, massive defenses, and we don't even know what's inside the closet now. But the truth is that, what felt like it was some kind of a disastrous hurt is just a simple hurt that we can now feel and, transform. So as a consequence, as that hurt can diminish as we do that, and therefore we will no longer feel the need to provoke the other person. And also, as the need to reproduce the childhood situation decreases, you will then become less withdrawn or demanding or whatever. You will hurt others less and less so that they will not have to provoke you. If they do, you will now also understand that they reacted out of the same childish blind needs as you did. So then we can understand, okay, the other person is in a recreation process, let me get conscious of that so that I'm not feeding into it. And let me be able to hold this child like I would my own in some way. And so now you can see how you ascribe different motivations to the other person's provocation than to your own, right? You see your child, there. So even if and when you actually realize that you initiated the provocation. I lost that sentence. Let me try it again. Now you can see how you ascribe different motivations to the other person's provocation than to your own, even if and when you actually realize you initiated the provocation, right? So, we're seeing the other person is doing this, not realizing that what's underneath that is the same thing that we're doing, right? And if we can really see that also, especially if there's, a possibility of that relationship, a beautiful coming together, right? And of a recognition of each other's wounded children. And we can, hold that place for each other in a healthy way too. But if we're, demanding that we hold it for each other, then we're off in the wrong direction. We have to come to that through our own free will and understanding. So as you gain a different view on your own hurt, understanding its real origin, you will gain the same detachment from the reaction of the other person. You will find exactly the same reactions in yourself and in the other. So then you can stop pointing your finger, right? Because three are coming back towards you. As long as the child's conflict remains unresolved in you, the difference seems enormous. But when you perceive reality, you begin to break the repetitive vicious circle. As you truly perceive such a mutual interplay, it will relieve the feeling of isolation and guilt you all are burdened with. You are constantly fluctuating between your guilt and your accusation of injustice you direct at those around you. It's got to be me or them. Somebody's wrong here, right? The child in you feels itself entirely different from others in a world of its own. It lives in such a damaging illusion. And that's the child we need to go in and reconnect with. That's the lost, wounded child that needs a parent that only we can provide. As you solve this conflict, your awareness of other people will increase. As yet, you are so unaware of the reality of other people. On the one hand, you accuse them and are inordinately hurt by them because you do not understand yourself and therefore do not understand the other person. On the other hand, and at the same time, you refuse to become aware when you are hurt. We'll feel any other feeling. I'm aware I'm mad, I'm aware, but we don't want to go to that hurt. And it's the grief, it's the simple loss, it's that simple, pain of what is that the guide was, suggesting that we go to in this lecture. This seems paradoxical, yet it is not. As you experience for yourself the interaction set forth tonight, you will find this to be true. While sometimes you may exaggerate a hurt, at other times you do not allow yourself to know that it happened at all, because it may not fit the picture you have of the situation. It may spoil your self-constructed idea, or it may not correspond to your desire at the time. If the situation seems otherwise favorable and fits into your preconceived idea, you leave out all that jars you, allowing it to fester underneath and create unconscious hostility. This entire reaction inhibits your intuitive faculties, at least in this particular respect. The constant provocation that goes on among human beings, while it is hidden from your awareness now, is a reality you will come to perceive very clearly. And this will have a very liberating effect on you and on your surroundings. It's really true, when we can start recognizing, these unconscious currents and provocations, we don't bite in the same way that we used to. And we already know, how to just be with the triggers in a different way. So he's closing now. It looks like he says, "Go your way, my dearest ones. And may the blessings we bring to all of you envelop and penetrate your body, soul, and spirit, so that you open up your soul and become your real self, your own real self. Be blessed, my friends. Be in peace and be in God. Okay. Stop the share and any other, I mean, I hope we were kind of working your own energies and experiences with this lecture as we were going over it, because I think and if you haven't, try again when you get triggered, maybe going back to this lecture and letting the guide give you a session with it. Because I think it's very, very powerful and very helpful lecture. Okay.
Darlene, thanks so much.
You're
Yeah,
very
This
welcome.
was wonderful.
thank you
You
again.
have a great night.
Yeah.
Take care, you too.
Good
Yeah.
night, everyone.
Merry Christmas to everybody if I don't see
Oh,
you
yeah.
again before then. Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
New Year.
You as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. Bye-bye.